Today, in On Kindness, I'm speaking with Andrés Tapia, a transformational strategist and founder of the Andrés Tapia Strategy Group. Andreas has spent 25 years helping leaders navigate disruption through culture, clarity, and character. In today's conversation, we discuss the tools needed to navigate in the uncertain and wobbly world. We discuss how leading with character builds resilience, deepens our roots, and helps us collaborate, especially with those that are different than us. Leading with character makes us better leaders through a lens of understanding and empathy. I'm excited to share the conversation with you. Well, Andreas, I'm absolutely thrilled to be having this conversation and to get to do it in person with you is also really exciting. We've obviously talked about these topics for months now and excited to share some of these ideas with the world. I'd love to just start at the beginning. Have you just share a little bit about the work that you've done on leadership, on character, and how you're pivoting towards this idea of character, how it ties with inclusion, and why you've dedicated your life to these topics.
Yeah, well, great. Well, first of all, Nicole, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I've enjoyed our budding friendship and also collaboration on various things. So this is a real nice opportunity to kind of take that forward further. Uh, I've been coaching executives, then C-1, and then middle management and high potentials, and the success people in the succession pool and early career people for my whole career. And it's been thousands. And over time, I've coached them along different ways. The need for leadership development is always there, but the type of leadership that is required, some things are universal and perennial and evergreen, but other things are real contextual. We know the term situational leadership, and it's not just about the moment you're in, like right now, but it's the era that we're in. So how did I end up with character or character-based leadership as a priority now? So obviously character is not a new thing. Socrates wrote about it and many other people since then. But I really feel that character right now is a priority for several reasons. So let me back up a little bit. One model that I worked with when I was at Korn Ferry, which I'm not anymore, and I've now launched my own thing, was on inclusive leadership. And we did that for about a decade, created a model on that. And that was really part of the situational leadership as diversity and inclusion sort of emerged as really a priority. Leaders that embraced it sort of from a values perspective didn't know how to be inclusive. So that's a whole other chapter, but it was important because as I moved on and as thought leadership evolves and the situations evolve, you have to keep up with what is a new context. And while inclusive leadership was powerful and important, and it took the leadership development conversation deeper than traditional leadership development, I felt that it was time to double click and go to a more core thing within individual leaders and teams of leaders. Yeah. So how do I end up on character? This is an era of shamelessness, and leaders are being extorted. And there's just no other way to describe it but extortion. And leaders of character are getting wobbly. And some are actually succumbing to what is being demanded of them in an extortive way. So I really feel that situationally, I want to be committed with my time and energy to help these leaders of character shore up their character in a moment where the pressures to take shortcuts or give in to things that are not based on their values is in short supply. So that's one reason, right? But the other has to do with this era of disruption. And why do I believe character is important? This disruption right now, and as we well know, it's happening in the environment, in the politics of society, every possible area of our personal lives. And what happens in an era of disruption for leaders? Leaders are trying to lead in a world that has gotten off center. It's like a top that's just spinning sideways. And there's a lot of things that individual leaders cannot control. They're outside of that because the forces are so large. but they still got to lead their people. They still got to lead their organizations. So when I spend time with leaders, I say, in that world that has become off center, what is the one thing you can control? And that is yourself.
Yeah.
And so the shorthand is, in a world off center, centered yourself. So because when you have to lead and you don't know what to do, you still have to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, and the shorthand there is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. And in order to get to the answer with things that you never faced before, if you're not centered and if you don't know who you are and what your purpose is, then how can you possibly lead your organization in its own purpose and when people are looking to you for the way forward? So I feel that character then becomes primarily important for being able to be centered enough in a world that is off center.
And so I love all of that. I want to dive in more on like how it's being received, especially in this place where everyone is feeling so much pressure. And I like it's kind of wobbly and it's a little off kilter for everyone. But first, a little bit more on what you mean by character, because I think character is, as you said, it's been around for forever, and philosophers talking about it. It's also different for every person and every leader, and depending, it probably changes. I think it changes for people throughout. How do you think about like putting that in a framework is what I think you're doing, that helps people kind of become unwobbly. What is character?
Yeah. So, let's recognize that there's roughly about 150 character traits out there. And the goal is not to measure all 150. And I've always shared that I, as a thought leader who values research, but also values sort of contextualization, and that I often operate at the intersection of the ivory tower and the street. So there's a lot of research and there's a lot of intuition.
Yep.
And the intuition is based on, in this case, having assessed and coached leaders, thousands of leaders around the world in all kinds of industry, from global 100 all the way to small 300 person organizations. Mm. And so when I think about what I have determined as a model that I use called character GPS, I focus on 7 character traits. And how do they come about? Well, it's to this intersection. And this is where I landed.
Yep.
That the 7 character traits are authenticity, purpose, resilience, courage, kindness, humility, and gratitude. And why those 7? Well, I feel that you can see there's a little bit of a narrative arc there.
Yeah.
That the authenticity and purpose really has to do with the person knowing who they are and why they're here. And courage and resilience has to do with this era of disruption and this era of shamelessness and extortion. That, and funding is being taken away, things are demanded that may actually be, you might sell your soul, if you will, in trying to save your organization. And then the others, kindness and humility and gratitude, have to do with the impact we have with other people. And so I really feel that I want to work with leaders in a very holistic way, get them centered, and then get them thinking that you're in for the long haul here. And it's brutal.
Absolutely.
It's grueling. So let's focus on that. And along the way, you've got to take care of people.
Yeah. So how do your conversations go with leaders in terms of why it's so important for them to do this and not to wobble and to really lean in? And from our first conversations, all those words that you just used, you use so many of the same words at kind words are similar, of like sincerity and authenticity and gratitude and kindness, and that the idea that those are power skills and actually not the soft skills. And as you said, I think the situational has changed, and sometimes it's really easy when the pressure to be like, oh, but they're soft skills, and really they're the greatest strength and courage that we have. And so how do those conversations go for you?
When let's talk epic narratives, and then let's talk profitability. From an epic narrative, in the end, who is it that we end up admiring? Whether you're a religious person or just look at history, or look at artists or look at just individuals in your life. Yes, we admire the ones that accomplish great things, but the ones that really inspire are the ones that led with character along those characteristics, right? And so there's something very human and elevated to say, leader, I assume that you want to, in the end, yes, accomplish things, but that you want to be seen. So you want to see yourself and you want others to see you as a person of character and led with that, because not only it's values driven and ethical and dignified and sacramental, but it's what makes people feel good.
That's what your legacy is.
It's your legacy, right?
Yeah.
And then from a profitability perspective, and the work that KindWorks AI has done has also elevated a lot of research along these lines, is that kindness is a power skill. This power is about accomplishing what you set out to do. In the end, that's power.
Yep.
Do you have power or not? And we can measure that by the basis, what is it that you want to do? And did you do it?
Did you accomplish it? Yes.
And if you did, you have
Yes.
power. Well, these character traits are the very things that enable the ability to get things done. And on several levels. One, it's harnessing my inner energy, authenticity, purpose, right? Resilience, courage. I need all those things to drive forward against all odds, against the disruption, against the temptations. And then the flip side of it is character is the thing that helps you tap the energy of the people that look up to you for leadership, in the organization, on your team, or out in the marketplace. And so if you're harnessing your inner power, which you're very proud of as a leader, in a really focused, most powerful, deeply rooted way, and at the same time you're unleashing that kind of energy in the people around you, I dare anybody to say that that is not a series of power moves. Absolutely. And the unleashing of the power within other people is just mathematical. You want to do all the work yourself, you're limited. You want to unleash 100,000 people, that's power.
Absolutely.
And kindness, for example, and humility and gratitude are the kinds of things that make people, it releases oxytocin and serotonin, right? And all the neurotransmitters that make people feel good about who they are and who they're with and what they're doing. Yeah. And that is a power.
Absolutely.
Release.
Yeah. And I'm going back to this. It's almost like setting the stage for a strong foundation of that you're setting that tone. Again, I love that word you use, wobbly. We're kind of in this wobbly place as leaders, and it's the world. And all of those character traits start to set a stronger foundation for the future of yourself and the company and ultimately the world as well.
Yeah, and that's why, and centering is such an easy thing to say, but it is so universally true. So I do boxing every week. I don't spar, but it's just as a workout thing. Yeah. And at the core of boxing is, as much as you're swinging and you're stepping out, it's always about coming back to your center. Yeah. That is the secret of great boxer. Is what is your center, and come always back to it. After the swing, come back to it. After the swing, come back to it. I'm a very movement guy, so I love dancing, I love surfing. And in every one of those art forms or sports, if centering is the core. I mean, think about on the surfboard, for all the gyrations a surfer does, the surfer has to be centered on that board. Yeah. With that centering, then everything is possible, right? And with leaders, getting us away from the metaphors, is that, the ability to pivot in a world of paradoxes and not dilemmas. And people get trapped in dilemmas. Is it this or that, this or that? And many times in this world disruption, it's this and that.
Absolutely.
And in order to manage the swing to the left, the thing to the right, or in the middle, is to come back to your center. Your center has to do with those character traits. Okay, this is who I am. This is what I believe, right? Even as I step in or out. So I really believe. And the other thing that I would say to your listeners, we're not implying that people out there, these leaders, are not people of character. A presumption is that we are people character. But just like a tree can have roots that are shallow or roots that go a few feet down or roots that can go several, meters down the length of a football field, then that's what we're talking about. Is how do you deepen your roots so maybe you can withstand the 50-mile-an-hour wind, but you cannot withstand the 100-mile wind. I think this work is about deepening the roots so you can withstand the 100-mile wind.
And that's beautiful. And I agree very much. That's a great metaphor to think about how we center as individuals and also as companies as well to be resilient in the face of the changes. So I know changing the subject a little bit, but not too much, but we're in this world, this change and disruption. And Gen Z is coming up. So now this year in 2025, 1 in 10 managers are actually Gen Z. And I know you've been writing and thinking about this, but why from that situational time, why now? How does Gen Z factor into this?
Yeah, I actually wrote a piece just recently that you're referring to that called the PTSD generation, and that Gen Z doesn't need our judgment, they need our empathy, because Gen Z grew up with live shooter drills between learning their ABCs and their advanced algebra. Gen Z had to deal with a pandemic that stole milestone experiences for them in a very formative time. They've had to deal with a world that is burning up, and they're dealing with a political polarization that is nothing but damaging. So now they're entering the workforce, and some of them are now managers, but this is trauma.
Yeah.
This is trauma. And we adults, older adults, went through that too, but it wasn't during our formative time. So I think that Gen Z has a need, and they have something we need. The need they have is, look, they're smart, they're ambitious, they're ready to solve the problems of the world, but they need to be given the opportunity. Number one, they need empathy, right?
Yeah.
For all the obvious reasons. And in that, they need kindness. So many times the older generation will talk about how sensitive they are. Well, if you've had post-traumatic stress syndrome, there's going to be a sensitivity. There are going to be triggers. And it's our responsibility as the older leaders to just simply be empathetic and kind about that. But I don't want to just leave it there about what they need. They have a lot that we need. I like to often say that to be young is to be experienced. Because who has had firsthand experience with the kinds of things that I talked about in their formative years, or with technology, right? Or with the way the world is. It's not our generation. But we don't have answers to world disruption. So where do the answers lie? I think the better, deeper, more creative, more innovative, more disruptive answers lie in them. Yeah. But yet we're not tapping into them as we judge that they don't know what they're doing. They don't have experience. They're asking for responsibility. They haven't earned their stripes. And that's bullshit.
Yep.
Because I think they know more and they see more and they feel more. And by the way, in some ways they care more because it's their world. It's their future that's at stake. The final thing I'll say is, if we always look at leadership in organizations we talk about metrics and outcomes. And that's fair. So let's look at the outcomes of the older generation's leadership. A burning up planet, political polarization, higher rates of addiction and suicide across the board, and just keep adding it up. If we just evaluate the world's leadership at every level, governmental, political, corporate, even nonprofit, I will give us a feeling great. So who doesn't know what they're doing?
What do we want success to look like in all of these realms? And absolutely. No, I mean, I obviously believe very, very much aligned, and that empathy between generations, I think, could be the future. And I also think it goes both ways too. We see it in businesses too, of, understanding that the way that the older generation was raised through the workplace was very different. And them understanding that the context, all that great context you said about Gen Z, is very different. And when you start at that place, then you can get to a place where together we can.
Yeah, and the together part is, as much as I've been a little bit harsh on our generation, and we deserve it, but we also had a lot to offer as well. And this is where kindness comes in, because kindness is not only about the empathetic view and the understanding, but kindness is also a recognition that I see you.
Yep.
And you have something that we need. And you know what? Here's kindness too. And I have something that you need, younger generation. And if we can get out of the judgmentalism and get into the collaboration, that's where we're going to find our way through this disruption.
So optimistic, how do you think that we're on the way there to getting out of that and getting to that collaboration piece?
I'm an optimist by nature. I've never been so pessimistic relative to me as I am in this time, but it's all relative. So let me put it this way. We have to.
Don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice. And what I'm pessimistic about is the forces arrayed against a lot of things that we value. What I'm optimistic about, but we're in a hole, is that we're going to wake up and we're going to look and see, are we going to keep feeding the polarization that has poisoned us? And are we going to keep, or are we going to sort of break out of it and say, basta? We're not going to make our way out of this unless we find a way to work together. And I'm not even talking about generations now.
Yeah.
I'm talking about all the ways in which there's breakage between different groups, whether it's political or age-wise or racially. The only way out is through, and that is to lean into each other, because the only way out is together.
Absolutely. And I think something you said earlier, I'm a big fan of, and I always say, and your example of, like, often you feel like you have to choose between this or this, when reality is it's probably an and, not always, but most. And so having your eyes open to approaching things of it might be an and looking at that. And I think that's where you said, like, centering yourself first so that you can have that perspective. I love that.
Yeah. And the centering is important because, trying to bridge these gaps is not easy. And it will require collaborating with people with whom you don't agree with on certain key things.
Absolutely.
But that's where the centering comes in. I might believe 12 things that are important to me. But centering helps me see, but when push comes to shove, which are the 3 that I won't compromise on?
Yep.
But what are the others that I can be okay letting go of or compromising on or just doing it a different way? And that is a key way to sort of sort your way through, because right now everything comes in as it has equal weight and equal consequence. And we're fighting every single battle with every possible thing. And that's just not.
It's also the beautiful thing about humanity and human nature is that everyone is different. And that's what helps us innovate and work together to actually be better, when you bring these character and empathy and kindness and humility all into the center. Well, Andreas, this has been so much fun. We're running up on time, but is there anything else you'd want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up?
Well, I want to, highlight the work that you and Danielle and the KindWorks AI is doing. And even as you evolve into a deeper, broader, more comprehensive thing, when I talk about optimism, and it's the rising awakening, and you and the organization exemplified this, that the soft is not the soft, that the soft is the powerful. And the way to undo the destructive powerful is through kindness.
Beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to all the work that we will continue to do together and the intersections of all these pieces. So thanks for your work.
Pleasure being here.
Thanks, Andreas.
Thank you.